All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome and welcome to the first installment of the lineup in 2024. Thank you for coming back. And if it's your first time, we're really glad that you've joined us today. We have a winter showcase for you today, and I'm going to go over who's joining us in a little bit. But if you have not been to a lineup event, this is a new series that Soho Crime is doing along with our independent bookstore partner, Mystery to Me, who is based in Madison, Wisconsin. And so if you have a really good time today and you'd like to purchase any of the books that we are featuring, please do so through Mystery to Me's website. They do such a good job and work so hard to put on these events, and we love to support them with our book sales. With the lineup, we also do some special discounts. So today, if you are interested in receiving any of these books, you can use the discount code SOHOFEB30, SOHOFEB30 when you're buying the books, and you'll receive 30% off, which is great because they're all new releases, so that's a great deal. And finally, all of these events are recorded and live streamed, and so you can watch them back, or if you've got a friend that you would really like to share this with, you can send it to them as well. And you can do so by just revisiting the same link or visiting our website, which is soholineup.com. My name is Lily Dite, and I'm honored to be taking you through this event today, and I'm going to introduce you to our authors. And before we begin, if you have any questions for any of these authors, you can put them in the Q&A box, which is on the right side of your screen. And if we have time at the end, we will be answering these questions. So welcome, we're glad you're here. Joining us today, we have Kate Brody. Kate Brody lives in Los Angeles, California. Her work has previously appeared in LitHub and the Literary Review, among other publications. She holds an MFA from NYU. Her debut novel, Rabbit Hole, which we're talking about today, is a page-turning mystery that's as addictive as a late-night Reddit binge about a grieving woman obsessed with solving her sister's cold case disappearance via true crime forums on the internet. Welcome, Kate.
Thank you.
Grew up in suburban London. He's the author of 7 other books in the John Russell Station series set in World War II Berlin, as well as 4 World War I espionage novels in the Jack McCall series, and the thrillers Diary of a Dead Man on Leave and The Red Eagles. He lives with his wife, an American acupuncturist in rural France. His latest novel, Union Station, is the 8th installment in his John Russell series. It is a fascinating historical thriller in which a British journalist and former spy is adrift in McCarthy-era Los Angeles until his research into a wartime conspiracy brings him face to face with the perilous instability of a post-Stalin Berlin. Thanks for joining us, David.
Hi.
And Nicolás Ferraro was born in Buenos Aires, Argentina. While studying to become a graphic designer at the University of Buenos Aires, Ferraro earned a living by playing poker. Now he works as the coordinator at the Center of Crime Fiction at Argentina's National Library. Cruz, his first novel to be translated into English, has been published in Argentina, Mexico, and Spain, and was a finalist for the Dashiell Hammett Award. My Favorite Scar has also been published in Mexico, Brazil, and Argentina. Ferraro's work has been translated into French, Portuguese, and Italian. My Favorite Scar, which is the book that we're discussing today, is an award-winning coming-of-age noir about a teenage girl and her gangster father as they embark on a road trip toward revenge. So welcome, everybody. Hi, Nicholas. Thanks for joining us. Even if you are not familiar with any of the books that we are discussing today, it doesn't take somebody intimately aware of them to realize that we are talking about books set in very, very different worlds and in very different parts of our world. And outside of occupying space within the crime genre, they just all occur in very different universes. John Russell's series takes place in post-World War II era California and Berlin, whereas My Favorite Scar is placed in Argentina. And still more different, Rabbit Hole unfolds largely on the internet in contemporary Maine. All worlds likely required a fair amount of research to build. So can you each talk about, David, maybe you can start us off, the research process behind your novels and what that looked like for you.
Well, they're historical novels, so I guess it's different for me than it is for people who are writing about the present. So I have to read a lot of history for a start. But basically, you start with wanting to write about a particular place at a particular time, so you have to research that. And one way to do it is through photos and books, particularly books written at the time, because you know that they are not going to have things in them which only appeared after the period you're writing about. So, for example, writing about LA in 1953, I reread a lot of Raymond Chandler and Ross MacDonald and Chester Himes and various other people who were really very useful. Whereas someone like, who was it who wrote LA Confidential? Elroy, wasn't it?
Yes.
You don't know how accurate their research was, so you cannot rely on them in the same way, but you get a lot out of it. And once you've got the place and the time down, you have to come up with a story. And then you start filling in things that you find you need for the story. I'm trying to think of a good example, but I can't. I mean, but the novels are very useful, other people's novels, for things like clothing, food, transport, the way people were thinking, what they were thinking about. And then as newspapers, I went through all the LA Timeses for the period that I was writing about, which was quite fascinating. It's amazing how right-wing the LA Times was compared to what it's like now.
No, that's awesome.
I can't think of anything else obvious.
Yeah, Nicolás, how about you?
Well, first of all, I want to apologize for what I'm about to do. I'm going to do to the English language since it's not my usual, it's not my mother language, but my book is located in the Triple Frontier area that is shared by Argentina, Brazil, and Paraguay. It's far from where I live. And it would be cool to say that I infiltrate in a narcos organization to narrate all these stories. But the sad reality is I Google a lot because it's the easiest way to find information. But I try to investigate. I try to get away very easy with investigation because it's sometimes that it will be an anchor for your for you to sit and write the book. You get obsession with this idea of investigate, and how many resources or how much data can I get. And the problem with that is sometimes you get like Wikipedia syndrome. No, you start putting a lot of information on the book. It's like when you were a little kid and you say to your mom, "Mom, look what I do," and you showed your homework. I did my homework. Okay, I don't care what you did homework. You passed. Yeah, nice, good for you. And what I'm trying to do with my books is that, get the information that I need in order to get the story moving forward. If you, for example, you say, "Oh, this," if you say someone teaching you something like is okay, no, how this stuff works in the real world. Oh, when you shoot someone with a 9mm, it's like that. And when you shoot with a 38, it's like that. Or when you're in cocaine, it's like that. And for my characters, what they're going through is ordinary life. A brick of cocaine, a shotgun, or whatever it is as ordinary as a cup of tea for them. It's not like it's an object of strain. So I'm trying to look this world as they look at every day for them. You have, like, for example, they're in a shack in the middle of the Brazilian or Paraguayan forest or whatever it is, and they have like a lot of bricks of cocaine, and they're trying to get the antenna right to watch soccer football. They don't care that this is millions of dollars that they have stuck there. For them, it's like, I want to watch my team beat the other one, so I don't trying to look at strangers' eyes, because then you are like patronizing or doing something like that, and I don't want to do it like that. So for me, it's like that. I try to get some information that the readers knows that you know what I'm talking about, And when the readers know something that is true, they tend to buy all the other lies that you're telling them, right? You part from one truth and then you can build another wall of lies, but is supported by this initial truth. Sorry for all the mess I did with English, but
No mess.
So for my part, I love how you said there's two settings in the book, the internet and coastal Maine, because I definitely think of the internet as a setting that needed some amount of work. I'm also not a huge research person. I don't want to get bogged down. I think it's one of the sort of layers of story. Setting for me is something I kind of layer on at the end more than anything else. So I think in original drafts of the book, it kind of bounced between New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Maine. I knew it was going to be set in New England, and I wanted a certain kind of Gothic setting. The sea I needed. And then once I honed in on Mid-Coast Maine, I'm not from there, and I did really want to get it right. So I ended up actually using Reddit to research Maine, and which also took me further into Reddit. So it ended up sort of working both ways, and found a lot of little details there. I also don't love, as a reader, I don't love like long setting descriptions. And I'm always looking for, I think, the one detail that's really efficient. So Reddit was very helpful for that, especially, there's a main subreddit, and just watching what people talked about and things that they posted and concerns that they had. There's a bumper sticker in the book that came from that subreddit, which someone said they had, which is like in America, we drive on the right side of the road, but in Maine, we drive on what's left of the roads. And I was like, perfect. Like it just characterizes the people too, that there's a kind of local pride there. And so that kind of work was fun. And I think the Reddit part of it, like lucky for me, not lucky, the internet is sort of feeds itself. So it does become addictive. The minute you start using Reddit, you sort of naturally tumble down those rabbit holes. So the research part of the book was, I think, pretty organic. A lot of what I was sort of already obsessed with, that was finding its way into the book before I did any sort of explicit research.
Yeah, Kate, I was going to ask you specifically about that too. What your relationship is with social media, specifically Reddit, for this book, and why you did choose to have the internet and Reddit play such a big part in your novel.
I think I had written a book before Rabbit Hole that is unpublished, and I set it before the advent of the internet because I just really didn't want to deal with it. It just felt logistically like a nightmare. And then when I started this book, that felt a bit like a cop-out, just because of the way I and everyone I know communicate and how affected that is by technology. So I think given that the book grapples a little bit with the phenomenon of true crime, Reddit felt like a sort of natural way in. There are these true crime communities that exist on Reddit. And it's also a very easy platform to include in a novel because it's so text heavy. It's not like a picture profile based website. So I didn't really have much of a relationship with Reddit at all before I started writing the book. And then the book was my way of, I think, investigating how people were living these sort of alternate lives online. And I really didn't, social media itself was kind of foreign to me until, ironically, like for the publication of the book, I got on social media, and yeah, all my like fears have been confirmed. I can't wait to kind of take a step back. It's yeah, it's sort of everything I thought it was. So well done to me, I guess.
Yes, it can be a scary place for sure. This is a question for everybody, but we'll start with Nicolás here. I've heard it said that authors of the darkest noir are often the most upbeat and happy in their lives outside of writing. We see this a lot with comedians as well. What does it feel like to write the books that you write, and what is it like to immerse yourself in such dark stories, all of which you write? And also, how do you practice self-care during the writing process?
I wouldn't go that far to say that I'm the happiest person, because but it's something that I hear, and sometimes I try to think myself like that. But for me, writing graphic violence, it seems it doesn't affect me. It doesn't affect me in any point. It's not that I'm abstract myself from the feeling of that violence, but writing for me is pleasure. Not writing is, when you feel in the body some kind of pain or nervous or anxiety or whatever it is. But whenever I write, I feel at peace with the world. I'm go out and the birds sing and everything's right. My fears starts at the minute I leave the keyboard. When I have to face reality once again, is okay. I got to go buy store to buy groceries, and everything is more expensive, and I have to live with the politics and all that. At the moment I lift up the keyboard is the moment I feel like all this pain. But when I'm writing, I try to be as honest as possible when I'm writing, because if you have violence, you have to deal with that, and not to become to write like pornography of violence or like that, like these gore situations. But if you get shot in the head with a 9mm, it's going to spray the wall with your brains. Sadly, it's not something, but I feel like if we try to sugarcoat that, or if we try to not be honest, to not address this drama of violence, not only violence, the consequence of violence. I'm more intrigued by that. I'm more trying to explore that, because sometimes the characters in the books act like they're knowing that the book is going to end in 20 pages, and they don't have to live with they have done it in the book. So I try to be as honest as possible when I write this kind of. I know there are sometimes hard for the reader to read, to get through, but I get that sometimes. I hope the reward they get by going through this experience is something that they are going to get something from them. It's like they will try to see the world different that they're trying to see the before they read the book. Sorry. But I'm not get affected by what I write. I feel I can write, listen to Jack Johnson and be happy and singing Banana Pancakes, and everything is nice, and I'm trying to find the best way to torture a person.
That's awesome. And Nicolás, I have a question for you after Kate and David answer that is specifically about how you write violence in your novels as well. But yeah, David and Kate.
Well, when 50 years ago, when I was writing bad poetry and Bob Dylan-like songs as a student, and feeling depressed and heartbroken, alternately, I did find that writing it down, understanding as a way of understanding it, made me feel better. And to some extent, I think that is still true. Incidentally, Bob Dylan, I don't know whether you all know Bob Dylan's song Like a Rolling Stone. I always think that's a classic example of the tragedy of what's understood being the triumph of understanding it sort of takes over. And that's why it's in some ways an uplifting song, even though it's actually a very painful song in a lot of ways. But getting back to my books, there's a lot of violence in them, I guess. But more, I think there's a very depressing, cynical look at the world. And I don't think writing about it makes me any less aware of that or any happier about the world I'm living in. which at the moment is just going from bad to worse.
I have noticed, I guess, that not necessarily in the crime space. I think we were talking before this started about the horror imprint. I find horror writers are some of the nicest, just like loveliest people. And I do wonder if there's something to the fact that you're just exercising all your demons on the page.
Mm-hmm.
I think I wouldn't describe myself as like a happy-go-lucky person. I think if there's darkness in the book, it's because it's in my head. But I do think, I guess similar to what Nicolás was saying, that there's something for me in looking at it and capturing it and seeing it really clearly. And there's almost a beauty in that, and figuring out, if this act of violence occurs, or if this pain feels a certain way, can I capture it? Can I name it? Could I make it real with words on the page? And when I get it right, it's the best feeling. I also don't have any, it's not hard for me to write that stuff. I think as someone asked in an interview recently, like, how do you write those scenes, the like really dark ones? And those are I love writing those scenes because it feels fresh. It feels like there's new ground to break. And so I think it becomes a matter of just transforming it into art and redeeming it in that way. I don't know. I don't know that it changes my relationship to the outside world so much as it just, it feels like something that's necessary, just a necessary compulsive kind of activity.
Yeah, thank you. And I realize that's sort of a personal question, but very interesting for me as a crime reader personally, and also a reader of horror and dark literature in general. And I'm glad that you all are all right. Like, well, I don't know about that. But, Nicolás, I wanted to go back to you. Both in My Favorite Scar and your last book, Cruise, which we talked about briefly at the beginning, there's a lot of violence on the page, in which you said is exactly what we have heard from you at Soho about why you include it. You don't want to sugarcoat the situations that you're writing about, and you absolutely, like I think that's very admirable. This book, My Favorite Scar, includes a teenage girl, and she is part of the action, like one of the main characters. Did you approach writing this novel any differently than you approached writing Cruise, or was it very similar because of the fact of the age of your main character?
Yes, it has something that I have in my mind, because in Cruise, the violence is a trait that gets passed through the family. Like, okay, it's like that, and it's the person inflicting the violence is the main character. In this case, violence is like something that happened in the other room. You are here, and your fire is like that, and you don't know what is going on in that space. Sometimes ignorance is a bliss, but in this case, he hears so many stories about her fire that some of them have to be true. So that's the travel of Amber, the journey of Amber in the book, is to start opening that door and see what is in there, and gets flooded also by that violence, because violence is something that we have to address, because neglect that at some point we are all fascinated by that. It's like, for me, it's a stupidity, because if we can address something, we can change it. For me, it's like, if I show you like that, it's because I want to change it. I want to find the humanity in violence at some point. Because if there is no conversation, is there no opening to change the reality? So I want to have that conversation with the reader. Get with me and see if we can change something. But the problem with violence is, when you are suffering violence, most of the time you are going to be inflicting damage to the other people. And that's what I have in mind to Amber. Is she going to play the victim, or I don't know how you say the other part in English, sorry, a big victim, or the one who inflicts violence into other ones. In Spanish is víctima y victimario. So is she going to act like a victim, or how he changed that without passing all the violence that she felt and get through to the other ones? It's not, are you going to put the other cheek, or what are you going to do? So for me, that's the rhetoric of violence. You get violence, you are more, I know it's not the word eager, because you are not eager to pass the violence to other people, but we are more propense, I guess, to share the violence with the other ones. That's the challenge of Amber in the book, to not become part of the circle of violence. But as a that's my cat. Sorry. That's the part I'm more interested in the book. To have this conversation with the reader.
Yeah, we love a cat cameo, first of all. Second of all, I think that really comes through, especially the generational aspects of My Favorite Scar. So thank you for taking us through that. Another group question here, kind of getting into Ambar and Teddy and John, all of our leading characters in each of your books. And we'll start here with Kate. The main characters here endure a deep sense of longing for something that they don't really have control over. For Ambar, it's a normal life. It's to, not fall into the cycle of violence, like you were just saying, Nicolás. John, it's both something as lofty as political ideals or as basic as safety. And for Teddy, it's to find the answer to what happened to her sister. So how does this longing drive each of your novels?
So I think the question of what Teddy wants was, I was wrestling with it a little bit. At one point in the book, she has this sort of internal monologue where she says basically, like, all I want is to come home at the end of the day and like watch my shows and do my job and for this to all be over. And I think even more than finding out what happened to her sister, I mean, that is sort of what is propelling the plot. But I think she's sort of longing for a lot of things that she can't name. There's a sort of longing for connection. There's a desire to hold on to a past that is gone already, and to pin down some of these memories and to kind of solidify a legacy of her dad and her sister. All these things that are sort of impossible. So the book is propelled forward by that search for answers of what happened to Angie, but I think Teddy's arc is more defined by her own self-discovery. Sounds very trite, but like she has to find a way to move past all of this tragedy. She has to find a way to pull herself out of the state of paralysis that she's been in and actually kind of dare to want something more than just, you can't live just saying like, oh, I just want to come home every day and watch my shows and get up and go to work. Like she has not allowed herself to want anything, like a real future. And so getting to that place where she can kind of put herself forward. And I think the tension between those two desires is sort of is throughout the book. Like if she found out what happened to her sister, that would be the end of that, right? That would be the end of her sister. That would be the end of her dad, and she'd have to move on. So I don't actually know that she wants it so much as she wants to just exist in that space of not knowing, where she can constantly be obsessing over it. It's like that grief is a way of holding on to both of them. And I've seen that, not with missing persons, but with people who they sort of fall in love with their grief, right? It becomes this like very difficult thing, because to let go of that would be to like finally let go. And so I think that was the challenge writing the book, was having a character who really sort of refused to want anything or refused to admit what she actually wanted, and on the surface wants answers and is going to like do this investigative thing that is maybe actually at odds with her real desires.
That's great. David, yeah.
I kind of disagree with you. I don't think John Russell has lofty ideals. I think he's mostly trying to get by. He's politically motivated, and like an awful number of his generation, he's half destroyed by the First World War and what came after it. I think he is just basically motivated. He doesn't have a longing for anything except that his life with Effie will continue and that he'll be able to live with his conscience, which in the place he finds himself in Nazi Germany in 1933 is a very difficult thing to do, because you're continually being faced with decisions which are, well, they're lose-lose decisions. It's always the lesser evil. It's never, oh, I'd really like that. It's, oh, I'd rather not have that, so I'll take that. So I think that if he's driven by anything, it's that. I mean, it is a basic integrity to him, but it's his conscience that drives him.
And David, I'm going to follow up here after Nicolás answers with a question about John, because you've spent so much time with him. But Nicolás, I'd love to get your answer.
What I really love about crime fiction and noir fiction is that most of the times it makes the characters jump into the action. Most of the time we live in the procrastination era that I leave everything for tomorrow. There are decisions that are being postponed all the time, and for example in Cruz, when Amber and whatever it is, in this trigger situation, push them that, okay, you have to do something right now. They start that sense of urgency for the characters, not only for the plot. For me, when you are writing, you have two sets of urgencies. One is the plot, that you have to do something. You have to find the killer or the one who tried to kill my father. And the second is, okay, I want to try the normal life. And I really like what Kate said, like this longing for something, even you don't know what is that, because she wants a normal life, but she doesn't know what is a normal life. We want, we don't have. And I really like, there is a phrase by Alan Hitchcock, the author of Bolt. It's a magnificent short story collection. And he has this idea that what they have and what they want. When you are writing, you have obviously these two parts. And he said, for example, when you have a happy ending, is when the distance between what they have and what they want is close at the end of the book. And when you have the opposite, when you have a tragedy, is when this distance is permanent. It's a permanent distance between what you have and what you want. So I have that always in mind, because that distance is coming closer or is getting bigger, and you have to, in this rhythm of the narration, you have to put like, it's going to happen. No, it's going to happen. It's never going to happen. You have like this kind of roller coaster emotion for the character, or it's like you have Amber wants something that she doesn't know what it is, but she's fed up with this life of being on the run, and what scares her is what is going to happen if she continues to be in this life.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, David, you spent quite a lot of time with John Russell. 10 years ago, 10 years ago, you published Mazurek Station, and it received critical acclaim. Specifically, Wall Street Journal did a profile on the series, and at that point, you were calling the series complete. But we know that now you've got Union Station, which just came out. What made you want to return to John Russell in the post-war years?
Well, in one word, Trump. I mean, the world, particularly America, but all over the world, Modi in India, Erdogan in Turkey. I mean, everywhere these sort of jumped up right-wing people are sort of riding to power on the huge shift of wealth that's happened over the last 30, 40 years in all the developed countries. And Trump being in power, I just felt remarkably like Germany in 1933. So I thought a prequel to because the first of the 6 I wrote starts on New Year's Day in 1939, I think. So I went back to 33 to write the prequel, Wedding Station, about the actual takeover. And then I wanted to write a sequel about after the 6, which is Union Station. Because a lot of stuff I read about LA, I mean, going to LA was quite logical because Effie was being offered a job in LA in Masaryk Station, I believe, in Hollywood. So I can imagine them there. And a lot of LA reminded me of Nazi Germany in 1933, where the police force behaved, the rampant racism, the segregation. There's a scene in Union Station, which is probably my favorite scene, where Russell turns up at the black record store in South LA, where the white cops stand outside and don't let white people in because it's such a dangerous area. You should go back to your own. And Russell's just standing there thinking, the last time I saw something like this was in Berlin in 33, when people were not being allowed into Jewish shops in Berlin. And that was the motivation behind writing it.
Yeah, that's perfect. It's a great segue too. There's no better way to jump into it than what you were just talking about, David, about morally ambiguous worlds. Like each of your novels take place in a very morally ambiguous time or in a situation. In some cases, principles are too expensive to maintain. For example, at some point, David John Russell is, keeping company with Nazis, for better or for worse. And often characters like these are considered anti-heroes in novels. Do you consider your characters anti-heroes, or do you see them as products of the world that they live in, or both?
The latter. I don't think they're heroes or anti-heroes. They're just trying to get by. And as an author, you have to keep putting them in situations where it's hard for them to get by without making difficult decisions. And it was quite easy in the Second World War to find situations like that.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I know Kate, specifically Teddy, has gotten a lot of press as like an unlikable narrator and all of this stuff. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think of characters that way. I mean, aside from characters who are truly sort of like morally on the fringes, like I'm thinking of like Humbert, I don't know that there are a lot of characters that I experience as unlikable. And I don't even say that in the way, sometimes people are like, well, that's not a question. You don't have to get lunch with them. But I actually do like most characters if I spend a good amount of time with them. I also think Teddy's in this highly sympathetic situation. She's dealing with this just hurricane of family tragedy, one thing after the next. And it felt like there was no other way to write her than to have her have like some grit. She had to be able to push against that a little bit. The story of a lot of bad things happening to a good person is just not really an interesting story to me. I think it's a bit like writing a personal essay where you're the hero, like why write that essay? It's sort of ridiculous. And the thing that fiction does really well is moral ambiguity. I am always, I guess, surprised when there's like a takeaway that I'm endorsing one thing or the other. I don't feel like I'm moralizing at all, or like I even have a clear position on, any elements that appear in the book. I don't want to like spoil certain things, but yeah, it's to me, it's sort of the whole point of writing. I wouldn't write something that weren't morally ambiguous, because I don't even know what I would write about. It would just be a pamphlet or a manifesto at that point. So yeah, it's I don't know. I think it says more about the reader than anything else. I just kind of feel like, okay, well, that's for you to figure out on your own. I don't worry about it too much.
Sometimes I like to think as noir as like the desperation stories, and for me, my characters are desesperados or survivors. I like to think more than heroes. There are survivors. There are all the tragedies that have survived. I think we are all like that, and for me, that's put some perspective. Sorry, in the things they are forced to do, or they want to do, or they have done. Because sometimes it's easy to say, oh, I wouldn't have done that at that moment, but you have to be in their shoes. For me, that's the great. For me, literature is like that. You are training your empathy. Sorry. For me, all literature, you have to be in the other one's shoes. So in the case of Amber, for example, for me, it's like you don't have to obey the law. You don't have to be under the law, because the only authority she has ever known was her father. So it's like blood is first of all, family is first of all, and that's the rule you have to obey. And sometimes also for me the characters, even there is an Argentinian little town or for something like that. For me, it's like, I don't know, Daniel Goodrell, Ozarks, or David Choi, or all these people that are trapped in a no man's land that also has no justice, and the people is like, you're on your own. This is the land of you're on your own. You have to do what you have to do to survive. In this case, maybe you put in the Indiana, you have like this med cook, and you do that to survive. In Argentina, they bring wheat from Paraguay or not like that. So the line for me is like, I always is Wim Wenders, the film director, that he directed one of the David Goody's films, The Burglar. He said that what he admired in the David Wood character, that they, no matter how, can I say shit? Probably yes, no? Yes. No matter what stuff they're dealing with, they are have some code to attend. That's for me is the key for the characters. What is the line for you? Not the law. Is what are you willing to do? But you have to have some principles. Sorry.
Yeah, that's great.
I think we all get Stockholm syndrome with our characters. You do get to like them all if you're with them long enough.
Yeah, I love that. And especially what you're saying too, Kate, about like if you were going to write something that's just your ideals, it would be a pamphlet, it wouldn't be a novel. That's wonderful. I love that. For those tuning in, if you have any questions for Kate or Nicolás or David, now is a great time to put them in the chat. We've got just a little bit of time left, so we'd love to get to your questions if you have them. In the meantime, I would love to lighten it up a little bit and ask you each what the best piece of writing advice you ever received was. David, maybe you want to start us off.
Actually, it was probably Juliet Grains, my editor at Soho, who basically said, I can't remember what she actually said, but the gist of it was, don't assume the reader knows what your characters are feeling. You have to keep telling them what the character is feeling. And the worst piece of advice anyone could ever be given, I think, as a writer, is only write about what you know. If everyone did that, we'd have an awful lot of boring books.
And that writing advice is so pervasive too. Write what you know.
Yeah, I mean, write what you know. Write about emotions you know.
Right.
But that's not the same as writing about situations you know. Because it would be no science fiction, no historical fiction if you only read about what you knew.
Very true.
I'm sort of a sucker for very specific writing advice. I think the further along I get, the more I feel like anything broad is kind of like useless to me. But really specific things stick with me. Amy Hempel once, I was really struggling with the logistics of a scene, just kind of moving bodies and through space and time, and wanted the sentences to be a certain way. And she said something like, sometimes you need a door open, so you just, he opened the door, and that's fine. And that was helpful and sort of liberating. And then Hannah Tinty said once that you don't want the characters to cry unless you're sure the reader is going to cry. And I think about that a lot because it creates this gulf between the characters and the reader if they're feeling sort of emotionally bereft at a moment when the reader is not yet on board. And I since she said that, I noticed that a lot in contemporary literature where there's just too much crying, I think. Like we're very specific things like that. But yeah, for the most part, I try not to even give out any writing advice because I just think it's just what works for you. There's really no rules, So.
My case, I remember when I was a little kid, I have 20 years now, and I wanted to be an artist, a graphic artist, and I go with my pages to this famous for the town illustrator, and it was a second word story, and he watched the draws and said, "You're gonna be good for the stories, not for the draws." And it was break my heart at some point, but he has right. But I guess one has to find the rules that works for for yourself. That's the key for me. I remember one James Sally say, "When in doubt, cut. When you have something that you are not sure, cut. Go for that." And the other part, sometimes you start doing something and you don't have a name for it. You are saying because you read it, you have it for watching movies or something like that. But for me, what to separate question from answer, not specific in the dialogue, but also in the story. Because if something is is happening something, you have to let it go. Not to keep the if something opens a door and it has a gun, he has not to shoot everyone at the beginning of the scene. You have to, okay, something is happening, okay, wait, talk about something, and especially also with the dialogue, okay, what are you doing here? Oh, I'm come to kill you. Okay, no, that's not, when I was a little kid, I was, something like that, and you start beating around the bush, but you're creating tension because something is already happening. You have like these timeouts, and it gives you time to develop characters because something is already happening. So you have the reader's attention, and you got to keep this sort of special moments to keep some flesh to the characters. That's for me is like to separate these questions from the answers.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. I'm always taking notes whenever we ask these questions. Finally, very quickly, Nicolás, we'll start with you. What's next for you? What are you working on, if you can say?
No, of course. It's different for me because I know probably I'm writing something that is going to get translated, or maybe an old book for me is getting translated, so it's different. But right now I'm writing about a gambler that is gone that some northern part of the country. Once again, this sort of triple frontier area. It's also another. This I will try to have, like, father daughter, that's Amber, father kid, that's Cruz. Well, this one I'm trying to write is mother kid. So I have to have the sort of 4 possibilities. I have one of each kind, and this is about being afraid of what you love. It would be the tagline for, if you have to be in the poster, you have to be careful what you love. That's it.
Very intriguing. Kate, what about you?
I have a very messy draft right now of a book that follows these 2 sisters. It is sort of a dual timeline. The first part is in the early 80s in central New Jersey, and they have this extremely difficult mom and work at an amusement park in Keansburg, New Jersey. And then the second part follows them after sort of an act of violence separates them for about a decade. They come back together in the early 90s music scene in New York. And one of them is very successful and one of them is not. And the successful one has sort of secretly stolen a lot of her sister's work. So it's it has some of the sister elements of Rabbit Hole, but I think it's more about betrayal and art and this question of, like, what if you want more than your talent will allow?
That's awesome.
I've no idea at the moment. I've been doing this for 50 years now, and I'm not sure I have anything more to say of any relevance. But having said that, if I was going to write more, it would be simpler stories around simpler characters rather than big stuff. But having said that, I'm basically waiting to see what this year brings, because I have this sort of probably old-fashioned notion that, someone used to say, the job of a writer is A, to entertain, tell a good story, and B, to keep an eye on the world so that their readers can be informed a bit while they're being entertained. And if Trump is re-elected and the world goes to shit, I think I probably have to write something about that. I mean, it wouldn't be directly about that, but it would be a novel in which those issues were dealt with.
Well, thank you all. You all have very busy schedules, so we're really happy that you spent the time with us. And thank you all for tuning in, coming back for our first event of the year. We have an event next month. It'll be with Cara Black and Camilla Trinchieri and Teresa Doublepage. You can sign up for that one on the Mystery to Me website or on the Soho Crime Lineup website. And don't forget to get your books. You can get them for 30% off if you use the discount code. You can click on that little green square there at the bottom to do it nice and easy. And these folks signed some book plates for you too. So not only will you get your book, but you'll also get them signed, which is wonderful. Thank you, Kate, David, Nicolás, for joining us. And we will see you all next month. Thank you, Mystery to Me. Have a good afternoon, everybody.
Thanks, Lily.
Mm-hmm.